the Department of Trade and Industry, Maria Corazon Dichosa. Yes, ma'am. And rounding up our set of panelists is the Executive Director of the Department of Budget and Management, Executive Director 4, Mr. Dennis Santiago. Yes, sir. Thank you, ladies and gents. Comfy na ho ba tayo? Oo, close na rin ho tayo lahat. So the flow of our session this afternoon is that I will pose some individual questions to each of the panelists. And of course, we'll allow you to provide more of a detailed answer. And then we'll open the floor to some plenary questions from people who would be interested in the discussion. So I guess we pose the first question to, of course, the Secretary, Secretary Sring. This question comes at the time when the Philippines is, of course, we know you mentioned that the average around 19 to 20 typhoons a year, but they said that the power of Haiyan or Yolanda was off the scale, killing thousands and leaving millions homeless in the Visayas, and we know that it is actually the 24th typhoon to visit the country. Would you then agree on the conclusion that the said devastation was caused by climate change? If so, could we as a nation have done more to prevent such damage or devastation?
Thank you, Gia. We know there's still a lot of doubters. But in our context, whether they believe it's cause of climate change or not, we know that climate is already changing and that our infrastructure and the way we are, our location, might not be able to sustain as we've seen in Yolanda, because we know that in all probability, these typhoons are going to be a norm. And that our experts even said last Monday that the possibility of Yolanda or a strength similar to Yolanda happening again is also high. So for those doubters there, bahala na sila kung ayaw nilang maniwala, no? Pero dun kasi, marami kasing several factors on creating a storm. And one of that is an increase in temperature. Since the IPCC report, I said it in a speech in Warsaw, if you look at the way the events came, September, naglabas ng report, unequivocal daw, 95% of the scientists said, human activity did it. October, lumabas yung several reports na historical yung increase in emission. Pagkatapos ng October, minanifest yung findings na yon in Yolanda. Kaya when I was making the speech, I said, you are not affected not just because of what happened. They had a lot of attention on Haiyan because even before that, they know that the typhoon was so off the charts that pati sila mismo amazed. So we're saying is, there are now a lot of scientists, even when we were in Warsaw, saying that increase in temperature, yung tinatawag nilang warm pool, fueled what we've seen in Yolanda. So, as far as we are concerned, our baseline now would have to be increased again, and that Yolanda should be part of the standards. That's why we need to be able to understand that what are the reforms needed. Kaysa naman i-deny pa natin, we might as well accept it, and so that from there we will make the necessary reforms.
Thank you, Secretary. In fact, a lot of people are already saying that this is the new normal. The increase in typhoon is the new normal, and I think you have to couple it with other things in terms of climate change, which the Commission has been looking at, which is earlier mentioned by Assistant Secretary Goko, sea level rise. We are actually the 5th in terms of vulnerability. We also have incidents not just of too much water, we have also less water, as showed earlier in the session. For Director Dichosa, since this is about business, this is a business summit, and of course the DTI is a main partner here. We regularly hear of high-level political commitment, which is one of the key success indicators for ensuring that climate change policies are adopted and implemented. And clearly the partnership between Climate Change Commission and DTI manifests that. But majority of businesses are suggesting that government provides the needed boost, such as fiscal incentives, in order to mainstream climate change adaptation and mitigation into business operations. Would you care to comment on fiscal incentives? Is there enough, or do we need to do more, or are there other ways by which incentives can be provided to encourage businesses to actually go into being climate smart?
Actually, there's no doubt that high-level political commitment is really important. As a matter of fact, our main tool for providing fiscal incentives to businesses is the Investment Priorities Plan, which we always do every year. And part of the priorities plan of the government has always been some environmental laws that actually requires us to support them with incentives. And examples of that actually the Clean Water Act, and even the Environmental and Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. But in addition to that, actually in our priorities plan, we also have what we call the green projects. It's actually a catch-all category for some of the projects that we think should be undertaken by businesses to support our green economy objective. And in fact, I think the green economy objective of the government has been carried by the IPP for the past 3 years already. In terms of the fiscal incentives, I don't know how effective it could be really in encouraging businesses because, for example, if we undertake energy efficient systems, what companies actually have are savings. It's not really income that could be a basis for what the law actually provides now as income tax exemption. So maybe there could be other market-based incentives that could be considered, and I think this is something that we could actually brainstorm on because I don't think that what the current incentives laws provide is actually enough really to encourage more of our companies to go into climate change or climate smart activities.
Thank you. Maybe some of our gentlemen here who are in business can also comment on the incentives. What are things that business look forward to, not just for fiscal incentives, but would encourage them to actually go into climate smart initiatives?
When you look at the business sector, we'd rather focus more on the SMEs. We'd rather help them by providing more incentives, but in the form of fiscal or market-based instruments, in order to have our SMEs to be more competitive, in order for our SMEs to be economically viable, and to ensure their business existence after all, because the country is roughly 95 or 99% SMEs. So we are heavily dependent on MSEs. Remember, we are not an industrialized country. Our economy is dependent on the SMEs. So we need to have that support group from the government in various forms to encourage competitiveness. And how do we encourage competitiveness? One is attacking through efficiency coupled with incentives. I don't know how the government would define these incentives, and I believe the SMEs would be able to overcome these doubts of competitiveness as we are facing today.
Sir, would you care to comment, Sir Addis?
Yeah, but before that, first I would like to acknowledge the presence of the #1 boss of the climate change, the Honorable Hierson Sani Alvarez. Sir, thank you for joining us today. And of course, also Secretary Attorney Lucille Siring. So it just show how important this project or this topic is. Now going back to business, I'd like to think that bringing down cost and improving productivity is in itself a climate change action. In fact, China committed 40% to bring down not their emission, but per peso produced. So, in effect, this by itself are already climate change strategies. And as all the SMEs very well know this, bringing down cost and improving productivity are basic pursuit in business operations to be competitive. This really made a serious turn when all national economies were integrated. When globalization was on, we have created new markets, but at the same time, we are also competing with the rest of the world. So the key is how to be competitive, and of course, how to reduce energy usage, and there you go, that's carbon outright. And in the Philippines, our industries, from the industry side, I'm also from PCCI, I should say we're good in this already. And I think because we have a very strong support structure, for example, we have the Asia Productivity Organization, which is spearheaded by the Development Academy of the Philippines. So everyone is very familiar about 5S, quality circles, small group activities. These are all from this very strong institution. But these are soft items. So how do we really bring down our footprints? Of course, the hard items, we have to use efficient equipment. And this is something that we really look forward to when Japan is coming up with their green innovations. Anyway, as far as cost down, that's one. Now, the other item is direct. How do we reduce our carbon emissions? Well, Philippines, we have the Renewable Energy Act. And of course, comes with a FIT. And at the same time, there is another revenue stream, and this is the opportunity, which is the trading of the carbon credits. In the Philippines right now, we have 3 biggest large-scale projects, and of course, this is the one in Benguet. That's a 33-megawatt power plant, and they're getting carbon credits there. Then we have another one in Quezon City under Mayor Sunny Belmonte before, the methane capture. There's money there. And of course, in our company, we also have these carbon credits, and it's an opportunity to have reduce your emission, your footprints, at the same time, additional revenue stream. However, and this is where the challenge lies, the market for carbon has almost collapsed recently. So of course, Secretary Sering knows this very well, Ma'am Joy Goco, mainly because for one, European, the pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Spain, because of their problems, the whole EU economic activity has gone down. So right off the bat, they were able to achieve their emission cap. Then the other one also is, of course, maybe the estimates were very conservative when these rich countries were requested to come up with their targets. So they use a very conservative, meaning higher, so they have enough margin to wiggle around. And of course, the third one is the biggest market players has left the market. For example, is Japan. And this brings me to another opportunity. Japan has just announced they're giving up their 25% reduction. But because according to them, we're so engrossed with these trivial activities which barely touches on the real objective of reducing emissions. So Japan said, we're giving up, but we are committing so much money to develop green technologies. So I think Philippines has been always looking up to Japan, and this is really the opportunity. For example, just to give an example, I have some friends who are trading molasses, if you're familiar with sugar. Molasses is at the end of the line. It cannot be converted to sugar anymore. All of them are coming to the Philippines. Why? Because according to them, our molasses semi-waste is the richest and the most expensive in the world. Why? Because our sugar mills are, 50 years old? So, yeah, and especially Japan now is out for bilateral. A while ago, Ma'am Joy was telling me about this. Japan would like to really, they have the commitment to bring it down. And they'd rather go outside this present system because they would like to move forward. And I think this is the opportunities for small and medium enterprises. Thank you. That's quite long.
Thank you, sir. I think the Secretary has something to add.
Yeah, that's why I'm so interested to be part of this panel, because I wanted to understand what are the needs. For example, I just have to cite, I completely 110% agree that we need to support the SME. Second, we've seen that those who have taken the opportunities of climate are the big ones, those who can afford and have the research and development capacity. And these are the kind of things we on government should know. What kind of intervention should it be, incentives, or how do we enable so that the small, medium enterprises could really catch up on the big ones? Example, there's one cement company, which I will not name, did use husk for boilers. They did not do it because they believe it's green. They did it because by market force. They were forced to get into it because it made their operation more efficient and electricity cheaper. In fact, even the carbon trading, a lot of people are talking about it, when we all understand, and we should all understand, that the carbon trading system was intended to be used as an incentive, but only incremental. It cannot be the one that should finance the entire project. Kung sino pa yung mas nangangailangan, doon sa technology sana, ang nakinabang sa Pilipinas at pati sa ibang bansa ay yung malalaki pang kumpanya. And I heard one Lushotan company was the first of those who were able to get carbon credit simply as if they need it. But we're not saying, but those are the opportunities given to the large ones that the small ones don't easily get. But they should, I have the heart for the SMEs, and this is where I think DTI should work closely, no? And there are a lot of initiatives on the part of DTI. And we know also that the DOF are not really very excited of giving more incentives. In fact, they're now coming up with a new bill to take out all other incentives. I agree with some should not be given any incentive kasi kumikita naman na as it is, but we should also try to see where we put the balance that it doesn't hurt the very core of the businesses that we're aiming to protect as well. On the last note, with respect to competition, for example, we are so looking at China. We're looking at China, its volume, it's cheaper. We want to compete on the price. I don't think we can compete with China on the price. Because even if you go to China, their quality has already drastically improved. And there are still other, but it's so huge, there are still products there are really cheap. What we're saying is, if you really want to go green, you should be able to provide good quality standard products so that this product will last longer, so that it will not find its way to the trash. That's what makes quality products green. We don't want them to be throwing it. Of course, I cannot say much about consumables. And this is, I think Dennis Santiago, who's an advocate like me, would like the government, how do we contribute to spur economic activity, not economic activity, or industries that are local, that are, alam natin, the SMEs are also challenged because of the volume, no? That it makes their produce more expensive. And I think this is where government should be sensitive. Na kung gusto nating tulungan lumago ang ating local products, we should be able to also be sensitive on the pricing kasi kailangan din naman nila kumita. And doesn't mean that it's cheap, it's good. And I hope that the 9184 Procurement Act could now be a little bit more sensitive, especially to small, medium enterprises. Yun lang.
Thank you, Secretary. I mean, talking about procurement, and that's a very nice segue to get Director Santiago involved in the discussion. There was a presentation earlier, a discussion about green procurement system, and I guess maybe for our audience here, maybe you can elaborate more about how it goes about, how in fact it's implemented. You know, what have been the barriers and constraints in getting the green procurement system really up and running, and how can even business contribute? Because when I understand procurement, you're getting supplies and services from somewhere else, and that supplies and services should essentially be green from the get-go, so that you can be able to have your supply chain fully green. Can you explain, sir?
Thank you. I'll take the note from Secretary Sri. The Government Procurement Policy Board recognizes the fact that we have to go green. No? As early as 2004, there's this Executive Order 301, where government agencies are required to procure green products. No? And the Government Procurement Policy Board also recognizes the fact that the government is the largest purchaser of goods and equipment in the country. Now, our GDP is around 18 to 20% government procurement. So right now, the Government Procurement Policy Board passed a resolution as early as May 2013 looking at sustainable public procurement to address unsustainable consumption and production in the country. And then, of course, right now we don't have the nitty-gritty yet, but we are looking at the UNDP, United Nations the UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program, to assist us on the parameters to take or to include in the inclusion of green concepts, no, in the government procurement policies. No? At present, we are already in the process of undertaking or executing a memorandum of agreement with the UNEP, and then hopefully this will churn the event. And but don't worry for those suppliers, manufacturers, and distributors in the Philippines. We will prime the market. You're looking at a window of probably at least 2 years, no, to prepare the market, because one issue on green procurement or sustainable procurement is that not all manufacturers, not all distributors, no, in the Philippines are selling green products. Such that if we provide this in our technical specifications, this might limit competition. No? So, but RE 9184 is, or the core principle of RE 9184, or the Government Procurement Reform Act, is competition. No? So this is why we recognize this fact that we have to prime the market and prepare the market. So for those who are here, and we've been announcing this several months ago, even last year, that we will be doing procurement in 2 to 3 years' time with the green concept already. As a matter of fact, we want to advance this to sustainable public procurement, because when you talk about sustainable, we look at the social aspect, the economic, apart from the environmental aspect. Yep.
Thank you, sir. Maybe to the gentleman in industry, do you think with the green procurement, some of our industries are already, we talked about productivity, we talked about saving money. Are they there to be able to answer the call of government when it talks about green procurement, or what else can be done, maybe through forging partnerships either through the government or through from civil society, or even from small scale communities who might be willing to be able to help get this industry really get going. Do you have any thoughts?
Okay. I'll talk about my company, Team Energy Corporation. At the procurement level, we look at green procurement. But how do we implement them? It's with little difficulty. But it can be overcome if the company would really look at the value chain in itself. You look at the business inclusiveness. Then it's a lot easier to influence your suppliers when you look at green procurement. Business inclusiveness and value chain not only looks at the price, but it only looks at how the product was produced, what are the standards that is coupled with the product that the company wishes to use for it to be able to continue its business. I would say it's difficult. Because from company to company, the green procurement, the standard varies. There's no specific clear-cut policy that a certain product, say for example, an electric fan, we don't have any clear policy or standard that we could say that a certain brand of electric fan is a green product. We don't have that yet. I don't know who would set that, but as an individual business, we can come up with our own internal standards, so to speak, in order to promote in order to encourage other business to do the same. And in doing it, we influence the sphere of our business partners. And we could be successful starting from a very small initiative down the line, and later, if your partner would know that you are implementing this, then they would think twice before they could partner with you to be more environmentally conscious, socially conscious, for you to be able to continue your business with a certain company.
Maybe DTI could answer on the labeling.
Yeah, maybe
Sorry,
yeah,
alam ko.
later on. I was gonna ask, of course, Director Dichosa, but
So can I
maybe
add-
sir, and then
yeah,
ma'am can
business
answer.
muna. Can I add to that? No? Yeah, so as a global movement, green procurement, of course, it's a very nice activity. Everybody in this world will implement green procurement. But here again, for example, Philippines, this climate change, the effect which we are experiencing, this is not our making. This is done too much human activity in some other parts of the globe. So what I'm saying is, what is the big picture? How do we hit the bird between the eyes? So let's say, where does we talk about global warming. So where's the biggest share of emission? So if we really have to tackle this global warming thing, so I mean, you have to think big. So again, green procurement is a very good program, but as what Rene said, maybe it's quite laborious because we really have to, every step of the way, we have to establish some form of standards. Thank you.
Yeah, well, speaking of standards, of course, we know that through DTI, the Philippine Nationals, the standards for products and services are actually set through DTI. Maybe you can elaborate how maybe through that you'll be in the hot seat of the world.
Thank you, Secretary.
Or is there, or maybe there are already initiatives. I do know that DTI every once in a while does look at the different products and services and tries to see what kinds of standards, along with other government agencies. Like I think for lighting, you partner with DOE so that they can do the testing for the different light bulbs. But some of the standards are, of course, in terms of other appliances, maybe or other services. Maybe you can comment on that.
Actually, on the green procurement, we're actually starting on that. As a matter of fact, DTI already has a committee on green procurement. And in terms of preparing the industry for that, having a lot of products that consumers can actually choose from. We're also in DTI, as you well know, we're doing a lot of industry road mapping. And part of our plan actually is having a greening the industry roadmap and actually green industries roadmap. And we're actually still, at a loss, and that's why we're also keep getting in touch with a lot of consultants and a lot of experts because, as Ren said, actually the concept of green is actually quite vague for us. How do you know when a company or a product is green, and to what extent should the company go into certain processes for them to be considered as green? But in terms of standards, for example, the BPS, the Bureau of Product Standards, already has a program on green Ecolabel. And we're actually trying to encourage more of the products to actually enroll in that program. It's actually voluntary. I think we have some for consumer products already, but in terms of preparing them for the green procurement program of the government, probably it would be good if that green eco-labeling program of the government, which is actually housed in DTI, would be actually expanded to cover a lot of products that may be subject of a lot of procurement by government eventually. This is actually a program that actually we would like to partner with industry because we actually do not know what are the barriers really to go green. As mentioned earlier, MSMEs, they have financial constraints, access to credit, and then always the concern of, you always look at the bottom lines, particularly for the small companies. We try to do that in DTI. We have a lot of programs for MSMEs. We try to do a lot of capacity building maybe some financial assistance for them to go into certain processes that would actually produce green products eventually, like our one town, one product concept. But these are things that probably would have to come under a framework that would really, under DTI, we have a green policy, green economy program. And probably since this is something new for us as well, this is one partnership that we can actually, go into more discussion with the private sector. And we're quite open about that.
Yes.
So
I
let
s-
me hear from the green procurement.
Actually, we recognize the apprehension of the industry, such that we are providing a window, the Government Procurement Policy Board, in formulating the parameters for green purchasing or green procurement. We recognize the fact that the market is not yet prepared as of now. We know that it might be, or it will be expensive on the part of the industry to shift manufacturing processes, and all those aspects of producing the goods. But then this is the reason why we said that we are priming the market, because we want to prepare you. And then this is also a part of an incentive, because we'll be looking at a scoring or a point system, such that if your product is green, you get more points as opposed to the product that's not green. Yeah, that's right. So we are looking at this, and then we'll be very inclusive when we develop the technical parameters, such that we will be conducting several focus group discussions with the private sector, with the SMEs, and then we will be doing this in partnership with you. This is not. We will be also doing this in a staggered basis. The Marrakesh process is a 10-year process. In the Philippines, we're looking at a 2-year window. At present, DTI through the PSEPSD or the Ecolabeling, they only have probably less than 50 products. And then one of the industry players, they were saying, if we do Ecolabeling, then it adds more expense to us, because you have to pay some amount of money to be, considered as green, and for you to be able to use the Ecolabel. But of course, we will address this. It could be an Ecolabeling. It could be simply environmental parameters that we will provide in the technical specifications. So this will be developing together. So let's work on the context of partnership, and allay fears of industries will be left behind. And when I say that we'll be staggered in approach or in the implementation, we'll be identifying products first. Even in EU, they only have very few products that are considered green. So let's prepare together, and let's be partner in this.
That's what we wanted to share today, because the government is already moving towards that direction, and we want the local industry to be prepared, because right now, who's benefiting are really not our own products. Second is that when we talk about green procurement, eco-labeling, we have to be clear on what standards are we using. In the United States, if you have to look at it, despite them not signing that Kyoto Protocol and just completely did not even join in this Warsaw, on a state by state, like California, they're leading the way really in moving their SMEs towards that kind of doing business. Their standards are clear. It's not very expensive to qualify. And here in our country, and I must say, I don't know if I feel good seeing LEED standards. How come that's an American standard? And yet they all post it in their buildings. What incentive are they giving? I'm even wondering, what incentive are they getting? Are we already recognizing a US standard? Second, even our professionals here, I don't know if anyone here in the room, and I hope you take this constructively. Our architects and our engineers are not meeting eye to eye on what kind of standards they will have to follow. We have standards on Department of Energy because of several support. I'm an advocate of sustainable consumption and production. Under the UNEP, I am a member of the steering committee that decides what studies should be passed. It's like the IPCC of the UNFCCC, and I'm very happy to be part of it. Just wanting to know, how can I bring this knowledge to the Philippines? Kasi we are looking, the reason why this seems to be, I don't think I'm ready, it's expensive, because we are looking at selling at each other. We should be thinking of selling outside, because that's where the opportunity is. I've mentioned about the lifestyle of health and sustainability market. Look it up. Japan is very strong on it. They have bottled waters with that mark on it. Korea, Singapore, in Asia, they're very strong in it. The United States is gaining ground in it, on the LOHAS market. And I feel the Philippines, with all our resources, could take advantage in that. Siguro yung comfortability, no? Now, how do I get out of my comfort zone? So this is where us as a government, in the policy and regulatory, we understand that we are sensitive that we don't touch the bottom line as much as possible. But how do we balance that as well as trying to go green? So this is where this engagement and networking will come into play. And how do we help SME? How do we make the DTI our primary agency who's pushing for products, who are used to the old kind of thinking of producing more? Kasi tayo, a tree won't be valuable unless you cut it and make it into a product. Right? I mean, that's how it is. So there are new ways of thinking. There's now environmental accounting. Nandyan na yung wave na yon eh. So dapat patuloy natin ipapaintindi. And the green procurement is a good start, knowing if we can move it. Ang question ko lang, Dennis, bigla ako nagtanong, ano?
Okay lang, Sec.
You want competition, how many players do you need to be considered competition? 1 or 2, 3, or syempre pag 1, alam natin di pwede. So I guess that's it. Kung 3 lang ang meron, di 3 ang pabit mo. At tingnan natin kung kailan yung iba. Alam, parang mahilig, di ba? Dati nagtayo ng isang shawarma, kumita, biglang ang dami ng shawarma. Parang ganun tayo. I know it will, the proof of concept, we have to show something near. But yun ang question ko, how many?
The Government Procurement Reform Act naman allows, as a matter of fact, hindi na ho tayo nagre-require ngayon ng at least 3 suppliers, at least 3 competitors. Hindi na ho nire-require ng batas yan. As a matter of fact, even if you have a single calculated and responsive bidder, you will be eligible for an award. No? So kung later on, if we are implementing this green procurement thing, even if we only have 1 manufacturer that is green, we can award a contract to him or to that company. But the thing is, we have to prepare the market, and you have to prepare yourselves, because we are going green because this is the thing to do now. Specifically, of what we see, what's happening to our country. We are an island nation, and sabi ho nila, ang island nations ang mas apektado ng climate change. Those who are not signing up for the Kyoto Protocol, they don't probably mind, no? Kasi outskirts lang nilang tatamaan. Tayo, yung buong bansa natin, tinatamaan na ho, no? So, we are going to do this, and sabi nga ho ni Secretary, baka mahuli ho tayo, mahuli yung industry. Kasi ho, yung countries like Mauritius, for example, 10 years ago, ginagawa na ho ng Mauritius to. In 2011, they already did sort of an assessment where we are. The Philippines is truly lagging behind. Nahuhuli na ho, no? In 2004, we had that executive order, hindi ho na-implement. So I think it's high time that we implement this. Government cannot do this alone. We need the industry. We need you to help us do this.
I think the message is this. Ito, I am very passionate, is this, that the government, being 20% of GDP, is ready to buy those products. But we want na ang mag-benefit local industries. Kaya naglalag behind in terms of international, kasi meron pa ring apprehension na baka ang mapaboran imported. Nothing wrong with imported, but hanggat maaari, kung gusto nga naman natin talagang tulungan ang ating mga kababayan, yun ang way. Hindi nga tayo malaking emitter. Pero once we do this, we have that moral ground. We have that moral ground to demand from developed countries. I don't know how it's going to be effective, but it's very difficult to be asking them to do something we can't even do it on our own. So yun lang naman yung konting pride na pag pumunta ako doon, kung magkikipagbakbakan kami doon, meron akong dalang balang matibay-tibay. Kasi hindi ko pwedeng idaan ng dahil binabagyo ako lagi or tinatamaan ako lagi. Dahil pwedeng sabihan din sa'yo ng United States, paano naman yung biggest city ko, New York? England is actually very vulnerable because of their liquidation. So they have their own vulnerabilities as well. So at a negotiation, ang pinag-uusapan kasi sa UNFCCC, it's not about just saving lives. It's really about the economy. And we need to go there with our numbers as well.
So, thank you, Secretary. In fact, pa-plug ko rin. We in WWF, we actually worked with DNR and the Climate Change Commission to be able to come up with a policy on sustainable consumption and production. And one of the things we found out there is that the GDP of the Philippines, when you look at domestic material input, is actually coupled with resource extraction. Parang magkadugtong lang yun. For every notch of GDP that's increased, we're actually extracting resources from the country. Part of the study looked at some examples of OECD countries like Canada, the UK, the US, and magkahiwalay. There's a gap between domestic material input vis-a-vis the GDP. And we asked, what's that gap? It's value added. We have to put, I think, value added into all of our products and services. I mean, the classic example that we have is when we worked in coastal communities, and in Palawan, we've been asking our fishermen, they export their lapu-lapu, trout, to Hong Kong. And we asked them, how do you export it? I mean, may pumupunta dito po na shipper from Hong Kong. So sabi, yung barko, Hong Kong, oo. Yung insurance, sa Hong Kong rin. Why can it not be a Philippine ship bringing Philippine product, Philippine insurance provided for that, so that you have value added for the cost of the goods that's extracted from the country, instead of having some business somewhere in another country benefiting from it, and we only get a measly amount. I think that's something, maybe part of the value chain that you will be discussing in terms of greening the procurement system, should also look at adding value, and maybe for companies should also look at adding value to their products. I guess we have some room for a few questions. Those who would be interested to join the discussion. Yes, ma'am. Teka lang. Sige, si ma'am muna, then si ma'am Edna will have.
Yeah.
Your name po, ma'am, and
My
your
name
association.
is Elsie David. I represent the Association of Petrochemical Manufacturers of the Philippines. My question is for Secretary Serene. Ma'am, it's so good to know that the National Climate Change Action Plan is based on science facts. So I would like to know, ma'am, if you learned today that a certain product is being banned in spite of its alternative having 25 times the water footprint of this banned product and 7 times the carbon footprint of this banned product, would you be amazed? And would you be willing to sit down with the group that represents the SMEs with 500,000 labor force to look at the scientific facts? I'm talking about the plastic bag.
Okay, if you followed about the plastic bag, if you're saying I'm willing to sit down, of course, I can
Thank
never
you.
say no. I'm your public servant. Second, when I was talking about crafting this, in fact, the plastic industry was part of the crafting of the technical working group that did this. If you look at the plan, it says transition. It's the when do you think would be the perfect time to transition from what? From this to that. And when they asked me, am I anti-plastic? I would be plastic to say that I am anti-plastic, nor am I pro-plastic, because I need to understand the whole thing before I even give an opinion. It's the same way I don't have an opinion on RH law because I did not read it. But the climate smart industry on plastic, I said, if we are to ban this because of the issues of the basura, di ba? Yun ang pinaka-primary nun, no? Meron pang alternative dun sa plastic. Ang issue lang naman nila sa plastic, hindi natutunaw. Now I'm seeing plastics that are biodegradable. So that are the market forces that forces you to adjust. And then isa din sa consideration, when they asked me, should we ban it all over the country? I said, ko, teka muna. Kasi how many jobs are we talking about? If you are in the rural area, we don't really use a lot of plastic. In fact, they prefer plastic for their palengke kasi hindi naman kakayanin ng papel. Dahil ang papel nanggagaling din sa puno. So, yung pros and cons, cost analysis, we have to be careful of trying to giving the wrong signal to the industries. We might be pushing you to do this and then doing something else. Overall, you're right. We need to be able to look at in its totality. We cannot just say ban plastic altogether. Oh wait, that's a very controversial. Please don't tweet it. I have to be clear. I am not anti-plastic, nor am I pro-plastic. But I am pro-Filipino. Kung anong mas nakakabuti sa Pilipinas, doon ako.
Maraming salamat po at sana po we always be reminded to go climate smart. And that has a very definite definition. Reduce our carbon footprint, reduce our water footprint, especially since we are most at risk from the storm surges. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am Edna, you have a question?
Good afternoon. I'm Edna Tatel from Philippine Sugar Millers Association, and I am also coordinator of the Biomass Renewable Energy Alliance. And my question really goes to Secretary Sering, because this is really regarding the renewable energy law. Siguro, ma'am, you already know that the implementation of the renewable energy law is not really in full swing, because if you because the law really looks at the participation of the private sector to go into renewable energy. Ang ano ko lang, well, maybe this is a matter of nagsusumbong ako that we have two types of incentives in the law, di ba? We have the fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. In terms of the fiscal incentives, we have this VAT-free purchase, local purchase. At saka meron din tayo ng VAT-free purchases and VAT-free importation for farmers who will engage in biomass production, biomass plantations. Both of these, they don't have implementing rules. Tapos kung sasabihin naman natin sa non-fiscal incentives, I think all of us know that the feed-in tariff is still not there. And there are still other policies like RPS is still not there. And ang sinasabi lang, the recently approved implementing rules is that of net metering, but that also encourages only less than 100 kilowatts. But in fact, there are potentials for megawatts for net metering. So, yun lang po. Thank you, ma'am.
Noted, if there's anyone who can answer, that would be Gia. She's the one who pushed for renewable energy law. But if I can only add on that, it was passed before the Climate Change Commission, Climate Change Act. What we did work with them now is this. We're pushing for renewable to be more sensitive to climate. Kasi nagpasa ka ng renewable energy law without looking at its vulnerabilities. We might be pushing a lot of hydropower in Mindanao when based on the rainfall scenario by 2020 and 2050, it will reduce in terms of rainfall. Yung mga ganun yung pasok namin on the science side. Example, Luzon will experience less rainfall. Then the opportunity would be on renewable would be more on hydropower, and it could also serve as a barrier and support. I think Maynilad could expand on that it could also serve as a way to protect how to capture water. So, Gia, I put you on the spot. You answer. Kayo nagtulak ng RE.
Actually, yes. it is really our, we were in the renewable energy policy when that was being discussed in Congress. But the reason why I raised it actually and for the Climate Change Commission is that one of the functions, the second function in fact of the commission is to coordinate the policies. So that's why I'd like to hear from
we're really
the
actually
commission.
very active in that discussion. And we cannot escape it because the civil society is also so strong. They're all over the place. And Gia, please help me in an explanation. What happened nga to the FIT? You used to be part of the board.
Well, yes, we used to be part of the board. I agree with Ma'am Edna that the renewable energy law has been passed for 5 years already and yet not in full swing despite all of the push that both the civil society has done and in fact even government. Unfortunately, there are over 4,500 megawatts of coal-fired plants which are in the pipeline now despite the passing of the Renewable Energy Law and the National Renewable Energy Program. Only because people think that coal should be baseload. I mean, it is baseload at the moment and is considered cheap. But what's the reality of baseload? The reality is, do we control the price? Do we control the supply? Even the supply of coal is not from the Philippines. We import that. Is it consistent? And yet, why do we still have brownouts if most of our electricity comes from fossil fuel? If you talk about baseload, that should be sustainability. And I think when we talk about baseload, we should also look at the priority dispatch. Renewable energy has prior dispatch, and that's good for island nations like the Philippines because you can locate your renewable energy source where you need it. And where you have the resource itself. I agree that vulnerability assessment is needed.
I
But,
think your problem is your PR. The renewable energy is losing out on the other side in terms of PR. You're not getting some of these messages across that renewable actually benefits the Philippines in a lot of ways. And
I think that's where the Climate Change Commission can help us. Balikan
we're
nila.
we're good friends, but you see, we're helping in renewable energy, and that's what we encountered.
Yeah.
We see a lot of good things there, and I myself would say, how come this is not out there? And we see that renewable energy, for example, in off-island economy, off-grid, would be better because you're not even saying the grid parity, which is at a certain point, magtatabla na daw ang presyo ng renewable over non-renewable. Wala akong nababasa na ganyan. Kasi kung ganyan din lang, presyo pa lang usapan, ilabas natin yung ganun. Kasi kaya natatalo yung FIT, ang impression ay magmamahal lalo, mahal na nga. So those are the kind of informations that we need to be out there. And I think their WWF, everybody else who's into renewable, should really try to send the message across. Kasi nga at the end of the day, yung ating mga kababayan na wala namang masyadong alam sa technical, ang alam lang nila, yung ₱1, ₱2 lalabas sa kanila ay masakit sa kanila yon.
Thank you, Sec. Yeah, definitely we will take that into consideration. We're actually working with financial institutions as part of our advocacy of Seize Your Power because we all have our right to power, but we have a right to clean power, and we should go to that. So any questions else from the floor? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon to honorable panelists. I have to ask this note bago maglobat. Anyway, I am Lito Nepomuceno. We were invited here by PCCI, thanks to PCCI. Actually, I work for a manufacturing firm in a well-known company. And concurrently, I am one of the director for Supply Chain Management Associations of the Philippines. So I represent SEMAP here. Now, this is more on inquiry rather than a question. SEMAP, one of the, the major thrust of SEMAP is to advocate, communicate, and educate. Advocation includes greening the supply chain. Every year, SEMAP held an association conference, and one of the event highlight is a best practices competition and sharing of member companies entitled Salute to Supply Chain Excellence. This is to recognize the best among the best. Now, I would like to ask the Honorable Secretary how our member companies could join and share their companies' best practices, mitigating climate change. Not necessarily, could join and share their company's best practices and mitigating climate change and be recognized as well by Climate Change Commission, not necessarily financial rewards, gaining financial rewards, but gaining company prestige as well. And as a follow-through, how our association can partner with CCCC. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that because yun talaga ho kailangan namin eh. We're very strong now in civil society engagement. We need to strengthen more our networking, especially in the private sector, because this is where most of the opportunities are coming from. I'm happy to say that Jess Reyes was a good network guy for us to convince PCCI to partner with us today, and that's a big step. We've worked before with Philippine Business for the Environment. We've worked before with the Philippine Business for Social Progress, but we need to be able to sit down to the guys, especially those who are what others thought are in the other side, because I don't think we can understand each other. It's difficult to be sitting in the room where we all think alike. It's always best to be in a room where we share, no matter if different opinions, but not necessarily enemies. And we welcome that support. And as I've said, we created a technical working group on the low emission development strategy, which primarily talks about this. And PCCI is one of the members. And we encourage you if you want to be part, I believe this will not be the first of this kind. I think PCCI, I know it's expensive to be here. The next time, maybe PCCI could help us on the venue. I'm more than willing to be sitting down and discuss this the whole day. As you can see, I'm very talkative, especially if I like what we're talking about here. But less talk, less mistake. I'm getting myself into trouble every time. Anyway, salamat po doon at sana nga patuloy. And I'm really happy, and my heartfelt thanks not only goes to our co-panelists here and that everybody else. I made sure that DBM is here and DTI is here para magkakasama kaming sumagot. Sana yung susunod na tanong sa kanilang dalawa naman.
Thank you, Sec. Yes, sir. We have room for 2 more. So.
Good afternoon, Crispian Lau. I'm from the plastic industry, but this question would not have anything to do with plastics. So, medyo, melamig. Hindi, actually, slightly lang. Konti lang, babawiin ko pala. No, basically, I want to touch on what we were discussing earlier on the green procurement program of the government. It makes really good sense. And sana, yung binabanggit kanina, na ang makinabang is yung mga local companies. So I'd like to put a link on what we were discussing earlier. We were discussing about what incentives government can give, especially to SMEs. For us, SMEs, kasi most of the plastic manufacturers are actually SMEs. Now, how can government help us to be environmentally compliant, all these things? Doon nahihirapang humabol yung mga SMEs eh. So may discussion tayo doon. Then doon sa Green Procurement Program, I would not like to see the Green Procurement Program be similar to the way the flag law is being implemented. Kasi sa flag law, kami sa industry, nahihirapan kami dahil nakakalusot pa yung mga imported, yun na nabebenta. So ang nakinabang pa, imported products when you can actually source it locally. Then I'd like to touch sa DTI side naman on the Ecolabeling program. Now, I'd like to ask people in this room, how many of you know of the Green Choice Seal? Konti lang, di ba? Now, how many of you have availed of the Green Choice Seal? Merong, a few companies went for the Green Choice Seal. We from the SMEs actually had this experience. We set up, the system of eco-labeling, I think, is quite good because you set the criteria of how to determine if a product is green. And then all sectors are involved there. Now, the problem there is that when we started applying for the Green Choice Seal, it's too expensive. For a small company to avail of a Green Choice Seal, it is very expensive. I guess you guys will agree with me. It's very expensive. I think they take a percentage of the gross sales or something like that. We were proposing, sorry to put you on the spot, but we were proposing as the industry to set a fixed rate just for the processing of it. Kasi, sa concept ko kasi, nobody knows about the brand. You have to promote the Green Choice brand and create that awareness to people so that they start buying green products. But we are not there. We don't have that awareness level. So, before you can command such an expensive price for a logo that will make no sense for a small company to go into, di ba? Then, baka doon natin pwede ibigay incentive eh. Perhaps we can set some products that government normally uses, like paper, bond paper, all these things. Baka pwede nating i-link natin sa eco-labeling program kasi the system is there already. And if they are categorized as SMEs, don't charge them too much anymore. I'm not saying don't charge them, period, but don't charge them too much. Perhaps a fixed rate. And then that enables them to supply to government. And perhaps we can have an accreditation system para nawala na yung mga napole sa mga government agencies pagdating ng mga procurement programs. Kasi when you go to procurements naman of different government agencies, let's face it, some of us in business, especially SMEs, we don't want to have business with government because of all the red tape. So if there's an accreditation process that allows SMEs to be accredited and to take away all of that red tape, perhaps it can also help us. At least may incentive din kami kahit papano to go green, to comply, and to supply to government para win-win situation on both sides.
Thank you, Fern. Would anyone want to react? DTI, DBM?
Actually, we welcome that suggestion, no? And I think this is something that I mentioned earlier, na we have programs in government, in DTI particularly, and this has to come under one framework of green economy, green policy, because we have also programs in BOI, BPSS programs, and currently we're now really consolidating all these efforts because, as I mentioned earlier, we're now very active in meeting to get ready for the green procurement. Now, as for example, the eco-labeling program, maybe we could discuss this with BPS. BOI can probably be there to discuss with BPS after discussion with the industry, because while we're one family in DTI, we're not really that involved in that program. But if this is a concern, particularly for MSMEs, we could actually bring the problem to BPS, and we could actually consider this under one of our green economy policy or program.
Katulad nung nasabi nyo na nga na we have to put in parameters wherein compliance will not be too tedious. Compliance will be, let's say, applicable to almost everyone in the market. That's one. We are doing that, or we will do that alongside the creation of those factors and indicators to determine a product as green. So there will be a standard. There will be a standard criteria to, and then this will be disseminated in the bidding process. So, sinasabi naman ho ng gobyerno sa inyo, no, kung ano ho yung requirements niya. And when we require green products or the supply of green products, we will also provide those parameters. No? Now, on the other point, on the price to get that green choice seal, what I know is that there's a certain price lang ho. Hindi naman ho yung a certain percentage of your sale. No? But ang sinasabi nga ho ng industriya is that it's still very expensive. Now, I always believe in economies of scale. No? Probably now it is expensive because ilang pa lang ho kayo nag-a-apply. As a matter of fact, parang yun nga, sabi ko kanina, not less than, not even 50 are having that eco-label seal. So, pag dumami na ho kayo, I'm sure bababa ho yung presyo niya. But of course, you have to comply also and then go green. No? And then, yung concept naman ho ng incentivizing it, sabi ho ni Sir kanina, wag natin gawin katulad ng flag law. As a matter of fact, up to this point, in our history, in our procurement, we have that domestic preference. No? Meron ho tayong domestic preference. And this is included even in our rules. No? Hindi ho yan nawawala. As a matter of fact, the Government Procurement Reform Act looks at domestic preference and provides for, as a matter of fact, the eligibility requirements having that domestic preference. As a matter of fact, this is being questioned by a lot of international institutions as a non-tariff barrier. No? Itong inyong 60-40, for example, yung ito pong 75-25 bago ka makapag-bid as a contractor, or 60-40 before you can bid as a supplier for goods. Kine-question ho nila yan. No? Apart from domestic preference, meron din naman ho tayong preference for locally manufactured goods. So hopefully we could link this together with the Go Green or green products that you have, and we will provide for that parameters so that at the end of the day, who will benefit will be our local manufacturers as opposed to, of course, those foreign suppliers.
Actually, I celebrate that. Sige, go ahead.
May dadagdag lang po ako. On the accreditation, actually, it's questioned actually by a lot of our developed partners, no, yung developed economies. But on the local preference, actually, BOI is part of the implementation of for example, the Footwear and Leather Goods Act. Before actually DBM, consider bidders, we actually submit them a list of accredited manufacturers by BOI. So actually, there are some measures like that, and actually that is something that we could also explore under the Green Procurement Program of the government.
Well, for me lang, kung government ang bibili, walang pakialam dapat ang developed country kung ang gusto nating bilhin, sariling atin. Yun lang yung point ko. Kung nanireklamo sila na it's anti-competition daw, pera naman ng gobyerno yon at galing din sa taxes natin. Di dapat ibalik rin natin sa local products. But there are certain realities we have to face as well. Second is yung incentivizing like green. That's why I celebrate with human nature. Kasi at that time when they started it, wala naman tong ganitong usapin Now we have Messy, we have other companies are out there. Kami sa Climate Change Commission, aminin ko lang, it was difficult because I was really demanding, kung hindi tayo bibili nito, sino pang mangunguna? Our t-shirts actually are made from PET bottles. No? And it's more expensive than the ordinary shirt. But we had to be conscious that we have to practice what we preach. Even our giveaways were criticized at one point, bakit daw yung aming brochure ay nasa plastic? So we had to change that in a way that we had to use recycle. And even our toilet papers are recycled using the green choice as one of our bases. So initiative naman namin yun, it doesn't restrict us from buying because we want to patronize this. In fact, if there's any sadness is totoo yung sinasabi ni Dennis, wala kaming masyadong option. Kaya minsan, kung ano yung available at sa tingin namin green, kahit imported, kung papasa siya doon, kinukuha na rin namin. But at the same time, it will be a signal to everybody na there's already a strong willingness of government to really prioritize green products and that as much as possible, our preference remains local. And the green choice, I'm familiar with that. I had to Google, I had to Google and I can't name the company, but we do buy their toilet papers. Tapos yung isa namang nagbibenta ng toilet paper, sinisiraan naman yung recycling. So magandang usapin, at one point, maninindigan ka na lang, di ba? But pag ganyan, all things being equal, it should really support the local industries, all things being equal.
Thank you, Secretary. And I guess maybe the last thoughts from the panel, from each of one, knowing that our theme is on forging partnerships for the industry and through government also, what would be your thoughts on how to really solidify that partnership and make it more sustainable so that, you know, you do have an industry which is climate smart? Maybe a last few thoughts from each and every one of the panel.
We do believe in dialogue, in communication. Sometimes that's a problem with Filipinos. It's an easier task, but it's difficult to implement. We need to sit down with Climate Change Commission. We need to sit down with DTI, DBM, on what we really want as a citizen of this country and as a member of the business sector. We need to be aligned with one another for us to be able to achieve what we wanted to achieve. For us to have the ascendancy to influence developed economies. I believe that the best way of influencing people richer than you is to be more morally upright than they are. And we have to start. The question of when do we start? We believe we have to start soon. Partnership with the government, partnership with civil society, partnership with other sector is indeed needed because we as business cannot do it alone. We need support groups, and the support groups would come from the sectors that I've mentioned. We need to start soon. This partnership for us to be able to achieve the goals that we wanted to have. That we wanted to achieve, rather, help the government and at the same time, help ourselves. Because in doing it, not only that the business will benefit because of profit, because primarily, profit is the main objective of every business, and in turn, that small profit should be turned to the government in terms of social actions, either through mitigation of CO2 emissions in a very little way, in their own little right, because we collectively, small things would mean a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Mr. Adis, maybe from your end.
Yeah, just a little rejoinder. I'd like to think that what we're discussing really is how to preserve this planet, so environment. Unfortunately, United Nations, for example, we know for a fact that these are controlled by rich countries. So what I'm saying is, if we have to preserve this planet and we are part of that, but rich countries, their concern is environment because their people are rich. They already enjoy the social and the economic benefits of a developed country. Whereas poor countries like the Philippines, for example, we have many, many needs: food, water, health, education. And I would like to think that environment is at the bottom. So what I'm saying is, sorry, I cannot relate to the small and medium, but maybe I can. What I'm saying is, for us to be really engaged in environment preservation, then it's only normal that this whole world should move forward. So rich countries should have a provision how to support the poor countries. And of course, supporting also these small and medium enterprises. How can you compete? How can we compete when out there they are fully fortified? They had very efficient machineries. They are very advanced in R&D. And we're talking here of what? Very small, how to compete with them. So what I'm saying is really, we should not only looking at each other and how to move forward, but we have to look outside also how those others can support us. Let's think along the same frequency. Please support us, then we will move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. From DBM, maybe? Director Santiago, or sige, ma'am?
DTI. I there is industry. We've been a long-time partner of industry, not because they get incentives from BOI, but because we're in charge also of industry development. And in fact, starting in January 2012, we launched the program Industry Development or Industry Road Mapping Program. And while we have received several roadmaps coming from different industries and sectors, I think one missing element there really is the green. We want, in the implementation of the roadmaps, really, we have technical working groups that's both government and private sector. We want actually to incorporate the green jobs and the green product concept there, even the green city concept there, in trying to locate where industry should be located to benefit more the poor and the unemployed. So I think we're a strong supporter of the green economy objective. I think it's a matter of us really sitting down, putting more details on how really we can make industries go green. The fiscal incentives that are currently available, our priorities plan, I think is not enough. Maybe market-based incentives is something to go and look into. This is a matter for further discussions. Partnerships, we're open to that. And I think we've been in touch with a lot of industry associations. It's probably just a matter of you telling us really how can we encourage you more into going into that direction. So you have DTI as a partner, and where you can actually just go to our office and probably tell us what you think about it. Thank you.
And Director Santiago?
Yeah. For the Government Procurement Policy Board and its Technical Support Office, we always look at ways and means to make procurement in the Philippines efficient. Now, apart from being efficient, transparent, accountable, and competitive, you want to make it green. So most of the industries that we talked to, they said that green procurement will be very expensive for us. To be very expensive in all the processes that we are doing, such that at the end of the day, you will be buying expensive products. But the government is ready to do that because it's high time to go green. Smart industry production is green procurement. It's going green. So, and this is what's happening in the world. If you remember years back, you will see in your computers you have that green star, energy green. Now you don't see it anymore, right? Because all these IT products, these computers, they shut off after several seconds automatically. And it became a norm. And you can set that norm as well. And then, sabi nga nung unang nakaapak na tao sa buwan, di ba? Small step for man, big leap for mankind. So mag-start tayo sa Pilipinas, and probably we can look at, or the bigger countries can look at us. And then I myself is a good example of a skeptic. Probably 3 years or 7 years ago, I was not looking at green procurement. I just want to go, procure until I got my first child. And then whenever I look at her, inisip ko, ano kaya mangyayari sa buhay niya after 20 years? To borrow that part of the song of Asin, for our foreigners who are foreign partners who are here, Asin is a good band in the 70s. That line says, may mga puno pa kaya silang aakyatin at may mga ilog pa kaya silang lalangoyan. So I'm calling all of us here to go green. Let's be partners. Let's do it because it's time to do these things now. Right.
Thank you, sir. And of course, Secretary Srin.
Dami ko sasabihin. Di cash.
Just last words.
last words. Thank you. Now, before I end, I'd like to thank our partners, Rappler. It's a social online media. Please check it out. They're really very up to date, and we just launched Project Agos. Globe for giving us free Wi-Fi, and other partners as well, and of course GIZ, GGGI, and everybody else I did not mention, most especially DTI, DBM. Lahat po kami ng ahensya partner dito. Yung Climate Change Commission po, ang aming chair si Presidente. So lahat kami sa ngayon ng gobyerno magkakasama dito. So my last words are this. When we talk about green, we talk about all these things, it's really about sustainable development. And sustainable development doesn't say restrictive development. It's also not totally correct to say that going green is environment alone. No. Because when you talk about sustainable development, there's still an allowance of use. It's just that we don't finish it all up. That's the logic of doing green, that you have to be able to find ways to produce something that are sustainable so that we can still continue to enjoy the benefits of that. whether it's environment, it's just too focused in environment. That's why climate change crosses across sectors. It's not just about the environment, it's about health, it's about education, it's about agriculture. It's really being able to use it. You know, it's like eating in a table. You don't sit there and if you know you have 3 other brothers, you eat everything. You eat what you can finish and serve for others. Kung gutom ka, yun siguro yung masasabi mong, how do you, now that comes your moral, kaya parang they think it's an advocacy. No. For me, going green is also about addressing your bottom line. This is what I learned from AM, doing good while doing well and doing well while doing good. And going green is about sustainable development. It's about the environment because we cannot finish it all up. If our minerals are there, mining shouldn't be done, maybe because we don't know what we need our minerals for. We're just getting everything and then ship it all out. When we should have our own industries, if ever, should benefit that so we know to put how in proper context all these resources. Right now, we're just like giving it all away. And this is where going green makes sense. It's not just for us, it's also for a future. And that when we talk about climate change, it's also about the economy. And we know we need new econometrics to fight that kind of mindset. Because if we always use our emotions, that we're always vulnerable, I don't think we will win in that kind of an argument. There were only a few who would sympathize with us, but at the end of the day, when money comes in, it is the most difficult enemy to face. So if we are to go there and we consider it a war, then we have to show that even going green makes good economic sense. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, and let's give our panelists another round of applause. Thank you, Secretary Sering, Sir Morente, Director Dichosa, Mr. Adis, and of course, Director Santiago for fruitful discussion. We learned today that, business has a risk because of the impacts of climate change, and therefore we must assess that risk and manage the impacts of climate change. And we know that governance is not just government, it's really you and I. So you as a business, part of business, but you also as a individual. So with that, thank you for this session. I will now turn it over to our last part of this business summit, to Ms. Sandy and Arnold.
Yes, hello. We have now come to the end of our program. And to introduce the last speaker, he served as a senator for 12 years. He has occupied 5 cabinet positions, including as secretaries of the Department of Agrarian Reform and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, as chairman of the Philippine Senate Committee on Environment for 10 years. He made an environment a major national concern. He has led legislative initiatives on major laws on environmental protection, such as the Clean Air Act, the National Integrated Protected Area Systems, Solid Waste Management Act, Northern Sierra Madre Protected Area Act, and the Strategic Environmental Plan for Palawan. He was responsible for the introduction of unleaded gasoline in the country in 1994. As early as 1988, his series of public statements and privileged speeches in the Senate already warned of the disastrous impact of global warming and climate change. In February 1995, he organized the first Asia-Pacific Climate Change Conference on Global Warming and Climate Change in Manila, which was attended by 32 Asia-Pacific leaders. The conference came out with the Manila Declaration that took full cognizance of the extreme vulnerability of our archipelagic and island countries to sea level rise and the ferocious changes in weather conditions. And this event was even before the first Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC, which was held in Berlin.
He also crafted a framework strategy on climate change of the Philippine Climate Change Commission, and he is a founding member of the Global Legislators for a Balanced Environment, a group of environmental lawmakers co-founded by then U.S. Senator Al Gore. He is also the principal author of the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, the centerpiece program of the President Corazon Aquino, and the law creating the Department of Energy, during the administration of President Fidel V. Ramos. An outstanding alumnus awardee of the University of the Philippines, he has a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University. He is a recipient of the Order of La Candula Grand Cross Bayani, an Order of Political Merit of the Republic, conferred by the President of the Philippines upon an individual who has devoted his life to serving the Republic and whose life is worthy of emulation by the Filipino people. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Commissioner Heherson T. Alvarez.
Salamat sa inyong dalawa, Arnold and Sandy, and for that very well-studied, well-researched mini-biography. It sounds like I'm running for some high office again. I'm supposed to do the closing remarks for the celebration of Consciousness Week. We did executive order during the time of the previous president because we felt the burden could not be handled by government alone. The first Congress that we held was a carbon-cutting Congress. You see that we had the pretension that we could hit the culprit and do away with the evil of global warming climate change by addressing carbon directly. But we found out that that kind of an interventionist act, behaving like a policeman to be able to manage crime or quell a social danger, the interventionist act is not sufficient. Kulang pala yung intervention. Ang kailangan pala rito is the participation of market forces. And we cannot do that without businessmen, without planners like you. The world community, when it convened for the first time, because of the work of a woman, another woman, Gro Brundtland, who became Prime Minister of Norway, Our Common Future. She had analyzed with this book, which became the rage of the time, that we have, if you look at the world, like it is one unit, one economic unit, and it was suffering some Malthusian threat because our carbon footprint, our fabric footprint, our water footprint, our forest footprint is diminishing the resources. And we're not sure whether we're replacing it. That was 1992 in Rio. 20 years later, and we were there, Secretary Sering and many of the Philippine delegation were there, in Rio plus 20, they did the assessment. And the well-informed scientific assessment is this, that after 20 years, and with about 1.9 billion people added to already 7 billion population, our carbon footprint, our fabric footprint, our water footprint, and all other life-giving resources have really been so dangerously diminished that you will need 3 Earths to sustain this population of 9 billion. We have formed the science, the UNFPCC, which is the meeting of 194 countries all over the world, have formed the science, the IPCC. And the science tells us, has told us, or that there were people who were disputing and denying it, that the Earth has warmed up by 1.3 degrees centigrade since the Industrial Revolution, when we have been using fossil fuel, carbon, and crude oil, which is processed into fuel like diesel, gasoline, and other, like bunker C. The Earth is warmed up by 1.3 degrees centigrade. And if it warms up to 2 degrees centigrade, we shall have threatened life form on Earth, because even the oceans will warm up, and the oceans will warm up, the corals will warm up, and they will throw out the life-giving support that we provide for the fish in the ocean, which is the principal source of many Ilocanos like myself for protein. So that if the oceans warm up at 2 degrees centigrade, I'll have brain damage. People like me who depend on fish for protein. That has been the mainstream of thinking of the science community. There are deniers. There are people who will dispute it. There are people with vested interest who produce oil and nothing more. And they will dispute these conclusions. But fortunately, in these last conferences, especially in this last conference that Secretary Sering and I and Secretary and Commissioner Sanyo were there, Joy Goko was also there, and many of our experts came. The undeniable fact is that the capacity for intervention of humanity, his police capacity to intervene at a social evil, because this is the danger that threatens the world, not only Tacloban, but all of China. The United States has had 10 cyclones, and in each cyclone they suffered 10 billion damage. Even New York has set aside, before the departure of that very business but dynamic mayor, Bloomberg, he set aside $200 billion to protect New York. Do we have that kind of money? Obviously, we don't have that kind of money in any of the communities in the Philippines. We must be a participant in this grand deal and understanding to be able to reduce carbon dioxide. There has been a scheme. This is what the interventionist scheme of the rest of humanity. And this is the Kyoto Protocol. The protocol would distribute the responsibilities of how much, especially of the developed countries, the industrial countries, the rich countries, because for the last 150 years, they were the ones throwing carbon dioxide and prospering thereby. How much would they cut? The protocol, of course, terminated in 2012, but fortunately we were able to revive it. And in Warsaw, we're trying to keep it live, give it life, and find the procedures on how to distribute it. You know, China initially resisted. It said, we're not a developing country, so why should we cut? Like the United States. And per capita consumption of carbon in the United States is 18 tons per capita. Sometimes figures say it's higher than that. And China is only 7. You're only 7, but you're 1.2 billion of the world. So you and the United States combined throw out 1/2 of this destructive carbon, methane, nitrous oxide, black carbon into the atmosphere. And this is the deadly, most potent destructive force that man must now confront. We must have the formula. In the next meeting will be in Peru, because every year we are meeting. Peru, and then later in Paris, that hopefully in Paris we would have worked out the formula in Peru, how to distribute the burden. And then the deal is made in Paris. And after Paris, that's 2015. Thereafter, 5 years thereafter, we would implement the reduction of carbon dioxide. But, you see, this is by intervention, by some kind of a global police method, not by your creative tools of economics of supply and demand, not by the tools of the market. If we look at the Philippines and look at the supply of electricity, which is the #1 culprit, because we're importers of coal and we're importers of oil. And coal is highly subsidized. So coal is really the cheapest fuel, but it's not the cheapest fuel because it's the most destructive fuel. Economists, like many of you in the audience, will say, externalities are still captured. Tacloban is not captured in the price of coal, or perhaps even the price of oil. Must we now intervene with our taxing tools and say, enough is enough, we'll tax you to your price, so that the price of energy produced from coal is not going to be 12 pesos per kilowatt? 12 pesos per kilowatt. So that if we add the cost of producing electricity with coal, which is consequent destructiveness, it could be 40. And if it's 40, then therefore wind, solar, biomass, and other forms of alternative fuels, including geothermal, would be very competitive. And therefore, we can transform the fuel system into a healthy, non-polluting fuel. And therefore, we are not going to be importing coal, and we will save foreign currency. We will save dollars. And therefore, because we have such rich sources of these four alternatives, nowhere in the world is this combined together, then our capacity to produce and export, as Secretary Sering wants to do, would be stronger. Can the government financially, creatively do the mechanism so that we can borrow from the future and start building the systems? Can the private sector, this is a challenge to the private sector, come in with their entrepreneurial courage and say, hey, this is 10 billion. Susugal ako riyan. Another 10 billion. But these are not the signs of the times. The grid system is not hospitable. It was said here on stage that there are many applications, thousands of tons, or 4,000 tons application for coal. In the manner that the world community is struggling very hard to create the tools of intervention and the many tools of ushering the market forces. Because side by side with the conference of parties, this is the government conference, all 194 nations in Warsaw, was a conference at the Intercon of some of the biggest business interests in the world. And they say that they will intervene with market tools. They're thinking of 100,000 intervention tools. They called many types of industries that can take the place of destructive coal and destructive oil. For the first time since Rio Plus 20, kayo, you from the private sector are coming into the rescue, I hope. In Rio Plus 20, for the first time, the government was joined by about 200 top executives of the globe. We are, with the resolution that we have passed in the Climate Change Commission, as I've initiated and approved by my colleagues, going to inaugurate a green building program. And because we had no money, the World Bank came in with the support system. Tinulungan kami para magkakaroon tayo ng green building. But that is both an intervention because it came from us. Di ba? We are government. Secretary Sering and I are agents of government. Our boss is the president. What we do is government intervention. But supply and demand also. Because when we start creating the rules for green building, and we're going to require that the old-fashioned buildings which guzzle, eat too much electricity created by coal or created by crude oil, when the windows of the building will allow the light to come in but not the heat, because it's going to filter the heat. When the air conditioning inside the building will use inverters but not ordinary air conditioners. When we'll use ventilations, which is going to be creative from outside. When the building materials are going to be sustainable. That will be an act of intervention, and we will inaugurate the program. We would have inaugurated the program were it not for the catastrophe in Tacloban this December, but we will have it in January. We've also approved a resolution in the Commission to start building a high carbon to low carbon power system. And there are many steps, and these challenges are all offered to the private sector. How many of you will harness the sun and investing for 5 years later make up for the savings and begin to have your profit? How many of you will invest with your rooftops and put solar panels or windmills? Ladies and gentlemen, this Consciousness Week is more a consciousness for a courageous and an inventive private sector. The public sector, as you find, had done all the rules. When I was in the Senate, I tried to remove lead and reduce sulfur intervention. Clean Air Act, the NIPAS Act on how to manage the forest intervention. Clean Water Act intervention, all acts of intervention, and they ended up with little fulfillment and sometimes more frustration than success. The private sector must come in. The private sector should be risk takers. They should be able to respond to the challenges of the market. I'm not saying that it's enough for intervention. We will do our part. The President has approved this resolution. In the interim, it's understandable why we want to have cheap coal, because there are 9 million Filipino households that don't have electricity, and only this delivery system is cheap enough to serve them, so that the children there can read as much as the children in the urban areas, their lessons. But we cannot keep on going and allowing coal. The private sector should come in with wind, should come in with solar, should come in with blue water, ocean in between Siargao or San Bernardino Strait with those long waves, and you put the turbines and you harvest that. Should pull together your resources and should see how long it will take and reach that length of time before you're able to make the money from the heavy investment of your blue turbine. The opportunity is here, and I hope we can be a model in our part of the world. The global community of businessmen are also coming in, but I don't think that our moneymakers here, starting from the owner of this building, is any less creative in turning danger into big profits. Lalagyan lang niya na solar system lahat ng bubong ng SM. Siguro, meron na tayong clean energy. I asked my staff, how many of you have 5 pairs of shoes? Nobody was raising their hand. How many have 10 pairs of shoes? May nagtaas ng kamay. How many have 20 pairs? All of them raised their hand. By God, a pair of shoes is made because of so much carbon electricity. If you can only wear 2 pairs of shoes, katulad namin mga Ilocano, you can get rid of 18 sources of carbon electricity. On that personal level, we can do the change. But on a business level, I think the change could be more dramatic if your executives, if your investors would be more creative. Maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat.
Thank you, Commissioner Alvarez. To formally recognize our partners, maybe is a secretary. May we request Commissioner Alvarez and ASEC GOCO to help us award the Certificate of Appreciation and Recognition to our partners.
Okay, so for our first batch, we would like to give the following certificate of appreciation as to our partners. To Attorney Miguel V. Varela of PCCI, maybe we would like to request Engineer Jess Reyes to receive the award on his behalf. And on behalf of USEC Adrian Cristobal and DTI, we would like to request Director Dichosa to receive the award for him.
A round of applause, please.
Thank you very much. And then for our certificate of appreciation for the individuals who have supported the summit, Mr. Rene Moriente, Sir Commissioner Alvarez, we would like to request you to please stay here in front. We'd like to request Mr. Rene Moriente to please come on stage to represent the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Director Dichosa, again, from the Department of Trade and Industry. Director Dennis Santiago, is he still here? Mr. Crispian Lau. And then Attorney Angela Ibay. Can all of you please come on front?
Thank you, sir, for our last batch.
Last batch.
Last batch na, sir. Sorry po. Mr. Johnson Ong King from the Pacific Paints. Mr. Johnson still here? Or any representative from Pacific Paints? Okay, from Binalot Fiesta, I don't think Attorney Juan is still here. From Absolute Distillers Incorporated, Mr. Gerardo Tanti. Okay, so from Boysen. From Toshiba Information Equipment Philippines Incorporated, Ms. Sandra Chu. From Phil Bamboo, Human Nature, Attorney Dulce Punzalan. And of course, Mr. Mark Mulingbayan from Manila Water Company Incorporated. Okay. Engineer Jess Reyes from Nestle Philippines.
Sir, stay lang.
Okay, so that ends our National Climate Change Consciousness Week. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, thank you so much. And we hope to see you again in the next National Climate Change Consciousness Week. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat at have a blessed week.